Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for Lifetime Adoptions webinar for adoptive parents. Tonight we have a special adoption story to share. We have a couple of adoptive parents with us, and we're going to ask them lots of questions and learn more about their adoption experience. My name is Kim King. I'm one of the adoptive family coordinators here at Lifetime. I'm co-hosting with Libby Denniston, and we're excited to have you with us, and we hope that tonight you'll learn something new, be encouraged, and just know that the Lord has your adoption in His hands, as you will see with Alan and Rebekah. As you know, you can type in questions and answers if you're joining us live. If you are new to Lifetime and have never filled out an application with us before, let us get to know you better. Just fill out the application on our website. It is a free application. It is a no commitment application. It's just opening the conversation a little further so we can understand kind of where you're coming from, what you're looking for, and be able to give you the right resources. The application is free online at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. You can also reach out with questions. If you're not quite sure about certain things in the adoption process, reach out to us. We're happy to answer questions for you by phone or email. You can email adopt@lifetimeadoption.com. You can give us a call at 1-800-923-6784. Also, I invite you to join us on Facebook, be a part of the conversation, or just observe whatever your hearts are feeling comfortable with. The Facebook page is facebook.com/open.adoption. And with that, Libby, we're excited for tonight.
Thank you. I'm feverishly trying to type out these links, so let me finish the Facebook one. Oh, there we go. I feel like every month we have adoption stories, but then again, it always feels so far between too. So I'm really excited to have another adoption story to present tonight, especially since it's National Adoption Awareness Month. And one of the things that I love the most about stories is something I think I've been hearing a lot lately in this just era that we're in, but when people share their stories, other people feel more comfortable sharing their stories and where they're at in their story. And our webinar guest actually shared with me something yesterday about the meaning of Lifetime's webinars to her family as they waited to adopt. And I loved her sentiment when she talked about how it's so great to have a support system through the webinars, because not everyone knows other adoptive parents or other people who have been touched by adoption. They don't always have someone to bounce things off of that even understand what they're going through the process, and that the webinars are a great place for a connection to other adoptive parents, just like all of you. But when you get to hear the stories, it's like you're connecting with someone who's been where you are today and has already reached the goal that you're moving towards every single day, and that you get to hear their tips and their experience through their stories. And so that's one of the greatest things I've seen come out of these webinars, is just the connection that people get to help them reach their own adoption goal, but also not to feel so alone at this stage in the process too. So Alan and Rebekah adopted a couple of years ago from Lifetime, and they have a beautiful story of open adoption, and I have so many notes from our talk as we prepared for this webinar, so I know we'll be able to cover a lot. But I think we should just probably jump in and let them tell us how they came to adoption. So Rebekah, are you there?
Yes, we're here.
Great. I know that you're juggling bedtime, so we appreciate you taking time with us tonight to just talk with the other adoptive parents out there. I would love for you to talk about how you and Alan just came to adoption in the first place. What led you to adoption?
Okay, well, Alan just sat down. He just finished putting Eli to bed, so it's perfect timing.
Great. Hi, Alan. Great.
Hello.
So what led us to adoption? We had talked about adoption before we had even gotten married, but it was something that we were going to do after we had biological children. And so after we were married, we tried having biological children for about a year and weren't successful, so we went and saw specialists, and they made recommendations, and they said basically just keep on trying, we can't find anything wrong with you. And so we kept trying for a few more years, and then they suggested more advanced fertility treatments, and we just decided that God's plan for us was just to go ahead and adopt instead of going down the fertility route. So we jumped into researching for adoption and found Lifetime. We loved Lifetime because of the support that y'all provide, and also that you're a Christian organization. And when we were waiting, I just had to say, Lifetime was sending notes of encouragement and sending verses, and through the webinars. I mean, I just felt like I had such an immense support system in a world of adoption that I was kind of scared of at first. So that's kind of how we got started.
What do you mean by, I think that a lot of people would really identify with what you were saying about feeling overwhelmed or even a little bit scared about approaching adoption. So can you remember, now that you're on the other side, what some of those fears or concerns were, and then maybe talk a little bit about either how you worked through them to get into the process, but then certainly now what it looks like, and if any of them came true or if they were just fell away? Do you remember what some of those were?
Well, I think some of our fears were just that we knew so little about adoption, so we didn't know, well, where do we start? I mean, I researched probably for about a year, and that was just kind of online researching agencies and domestic adoption and international adoption, and going through the state versus private versus, I mean, I just felt like the world of adoption was this ocean that I was just barely tipping my toes in. And after reading Call to Adoption by Marty Caldwell and just other people who had made recommendations and said, just look online, and every time I did a Google search, Lifetime was like up there at the top, and I was like, I think the Lord's really leading us towards this organization. And as far as fears, there were fears of not knowing what to expect. What's going to happen? How long are we going to have to wait? Even down to what's our child going to be like? And a lot of those fears, the wait helped us so much in just trusting the Lord and relying on Him. And it was about 15 months that we waited for Eli. And when the 12-month mark came around, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, it's taking forever, and we had to renew a home study. But the wait was absolutely worth it. I mean, God had that perfect child, a perfect time, and the relationship we have with His birth mother. I mean, we just, our whole adoption experience, I couldn't have imagined going better unless I'd given birth myself. So. Wow.
Well, that was a great webinar, so we just pretty much wrapped up everything into that, didn't we? I love that you spoke to that, because certainly I think whether you're on the front end of adopting and you're just beginning your research, or you're choosing the people who are going to help you, or if you're already actively waiting in the process with an adoption professional, maybe you're even matched, the waiting is certainly something that most people talk about when it comes to adopting a child, and I'm so glad you could speak to that. 15 months to some people might seem really quick, to other people it might seem really long, but what I've learned is that whether you're waiting months or years, it all feels really long until you get to that child. And so I would love if maybe you would just talk just a little bit more while we're on that subject about, you talked about how you were grateful for the wait because it helped you prepare. We're going into the holiday season, which I know can be very hard for some people who are waiting to add a child to their lives. And certainly you guys were moving towards becoming parents for the first time, and I think sometimes that's a different kind of longing when you're looking for that first child to just become a mom and dad, start that parenting dream. How did you get through those lows? How did you get through those valleys or those holidays or parties that really seem to emphasize it?
Well, it was hard. I would have to say prayer, a lot of prayer first. But it is difficult, and especially when the holidays come and families, you're seeing people, or if you're at an age where all your friends are having babies and you're the only one that doesn't have a baby yet, and you're just like, when is this going to happen? But I think the biggest thing that we did is prayer, and also just talking with your family and with your friends, about that, and just saying, explaining the expectations to them, and saying, this could take a couple of years, and for us, not having the expectation like it's going to happen tomorrow or it's going to happen tomorrow. Just knowing it could take a long time and moving on with our life. Like, we didn't put vacation plans on hold. We didn't, we had planned to get a puppy, and we said, well, maybe we should wait. Well, we went ahead and got the puppy. And, so we moved on with life and didn't stop thinking, oh, a baby could come at any minute. We just moved on. And when you least expect it, you're going to get that phone call saying there's a birth mother that wants to talk to you.
Right, and so let's talk about what that looked like for you guys. Did you feel like it was least expected when you finally got that call about a birth mother who had chosen you and Alan?
Well, Alan's going to talk to that because he's actually the first one that got the phone call.
Oh, awesome, good.
Could you repeat so what is it that you want me to answer?
Sure. Well, what was that like, because Rebekah just talked about how you can wait and keep your expectations in check, but then you get the call, and the ability to stay ready and expect the call, but also at the same time sort of keep going with your life to where you're almost surprised when you do get the call. So what was that like when Lifetime called you and said, hey, we have an opportunity, a birth mom wants to talk with you? Do you remember that moment when Eli's birth mother called?
Yeah, I do. But first I would have to say that the wait, in my opinion, for a man, it's completely different than for a woman. Because you have your job and you have other things that occupy your mind. And I think that for me, the wait was not as, excruciating as if it was for Rebekah. And there were some times that I needed to sit and explain to her that, this was not the only thing going on in our lives. And the fact that I was not focused on that didn't mean that I didn't care or I wasn't looking forward to it. It's just that, from my perspective, my very personal perspective, it was just a matter of waiting. I had to be patient, and eventually I knew that the Lord was going to provide, but I just needed to wait. So that's another topic of discussion in the couple, that the man needs to understand that women think different, and they're more emotional, and they need to be mindful of that and patient. But at the same time, the woman needs to understand that we guys think and feel different about things. So it's just a lot of communication that that you need to basically say what you're feeling and what you're going through, and the other person needs to be understanding of those things, so that this doesn't cause division in the marriage even before you have a baby. That is very important. And that's something that happened. Rebekah and I had a lot of conversations where it was frustrating for me to see her, sad, and for her to not see me sad, but just, talking through that and making the other one understand that, we're all on the same page. We do want the same things, but we don't react the same to the occasion. So back to the question. I remember.
Well, I just want to, Alan, let's pause right there, because I just really want to thank you for saying that, because I feel like I know for certain I see names in the audience right now that needed that, because I think for some women that is a struggle when they feel like, am I just in this alone? He doesn't seem as anxious as I am, and then that causes more anxiety on the wife. And I'm so glad you could speak to that on behalf of maybe some men. Maybe some men are thinking, no way, I'm the emotional one, and she's the one saying, it'll happen when it happens, so. But I'm so glad you could speak to the necessary aspect of communication and understanding as you go through it. That was so wise. Thank you for touching on that. So I'm sorry, go back to the moment when we could talk about when you got the call about an opportunity to adopt.
Well, we were that, and this happened during the summer, so we were both school teachers, and we were off. But Rebekah, for some reason, was out doing something, and she wasn't picking up her phone. So apparently we had gotten an email, and then immediately, this happened within a matter of minutes, and we got a phone call, but I couldn't answer the phone call. I was, having lunch with some friends, and then I got a text. So the text I could actually see, since we were engaged in conversation, and I saw that I have the text somewhere from Lifetime, our contact. I don't remember. I'm sorry who it was. Veronica. She said that there was a birth mother interested in talking with us, and it was urgent that I called her back. So I stepped out of the restaurant. I called her, and she explained to me what was the situation. There was a birth mother that wanted to talk, and she gave me a little bit of information, and she asked me if I was interested. So I told her that we were, and we set up a time for us to be on a conference call with the birth mom. So I immediately called Rebekah, and I told her what was going on. I finished my lunch, and then I came home, and then we talked about it, and
very excitedly.
Yeah, and we contacted Veronica. We were up to speed of what was going to happen. She basically guided us on what was the protocol that we were going to follow, how this was going to go, and just what should be said or what shouldn't be said, and it was like it was very seamless because we got a lot of coaching, a lot of advice. So of course we were not expecting it, so we were not ready. And then this girl said, "Well, I'm doing a couple of weeks." This was actually in the summer before the beginning of the school year, because we went to work for a week, and then we had to take off for like 2 weeks. So we took off while we were starting with the school year. So it was hectic. So we were not ready, like immediately ready, but we had just enough time to react and just go to where we needed to go to the birth mom.
Yeah, we had about 24 hours between Lifetime calling us and then saying, "Hey, tomorrow morning, this birth mother is ready to talk to you." So we were like, "Oh, okay."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I could imagine, too, since you're both teachers, and like you were saying earlier, the key was not to put all of your life on hold, and until you're holding that baby in your arms and she's signed all the paperwork, you don't want to just say, "Hey, by the way, I'm not showing up for the school year." So I could imagine those being a couple of hectic weeks in your mind, even just hashing through all the possible, how are we going to handle it if it happens today? How are we going to handle it if it happens next week? And moment by moment moving through that. So she was due in a couple weeks. Did she even last that long after you spoke to her? Was it 2 weeks? And then he was born?
Yes, it was about 2 weeks. And the way we handled that is that we talked to both our principals, and we told them, "Hey, we're in the process of adoption, and there is a possibility that we might be called, like the night before we need to leave, and we need to just take off on a maternity leave." So we just gave them a heads up before, and they were very understanding, because legally this was a maternity leave for Rebekah, even though she didn't give birth to the baby. In this case, the employer handles it as a maternity leave. So we talked to the employer, in advance, so that they were aware that we would take off at the moment that it was needed. So now, in retrospect, we were told by Lifetime that we needed to have like a bag, like a go bag, ready to pick it up and leave if needed, which we didn't necessarily have.
Yeah, we didn't really have that.
But
Oops.
So how did you prepare for that? Because that's a big question a lot of people have is, for some people it's too hard to have the diaper bag or even a bag or a packing list ready, just because they don't want to be too prepared, because then they're just staring at it the whole time, while other people like to have different scenarios packed in different bag, A, B, and C, so that they can grab them and go. So when in those moments, now you decided to match with her, and I want to get to the moment where we're at the hospital here, because I know you guys have a beautiful story about this whole experience at the hospital. But so since you weren't necessarily sure beforehand how to prepare, what did you decide to bring with you? Because that's a big question that adoptive parents have.
we we decided to drive. We first thought about flying just for the speed to be there, but you also have to consider your expenses. So we had to drive from the south to the north of the country. It was a 21-hour trip. So I calculated the cost, and I didn't know how long we were going to stay there. So I decided that driving was the best because of the cost. Otherwise, we'd have to fly into wherever, paying a ticket at the highest possible rate because it would be like on a short notice. And then we have to rent a car for, in this case, since we were out of state, we had to stay 10 days before that we could actually travel with the child legally. So all those things added up, and that's why I decided to drive. And since we drove, we were able to bring a little bit more stuff than we would have in an airplane. So basically, we were just going for a trip. Like it was not a vacation; it was just a trip. So we brought just the clothes that we had and
baby clothes too.
Baby clothes.
We had people that gave us like when they found out we had to leave pretty fast. People would drop off diapers on our doorstep, and they gave us formula. They gave us onesies. They gave us a whole lot of stuff. We didn't take a ton with us because we knew we'd only be staying for almost 2 weeks. But we just took enough for the baby to be warm and comfortable.
So what I would recommend when getting ready is that you're ready to travel yourself, and then for the baby we discovered that we need to have a lot of onesies and diapers, that's the essential, and a blanket, everything else, and wipes, of course, and everything else you can find a Walmart or a Target or whatever store locally, and then just go and buy it. Formula, we're not, Lord willing, if we adopt another child, we're not taking formula because while the baby was at the hospital was providing the formula, and they recommend you what to use. And when they send us, when we left the hospital, they gave us a hefty portion of formula for the baby. And then after that, we went on and we purchased it. So you don't need that. You just need a few clothes for them. And then once you have the baby, then after that, you can go and buy more. But the essential for the baby would be those diapers, the wipes, and a bunch of onesies because they're going to need probably 10, and burp rags. You also need a lot of burp rags because
yes.
we didn't know this was
I love these tips. It's so true.
Oh, and also another thing is that the hotel that we stayed, we ended up having a king size bed, and there are these cots or baskets. The co-sleeper is called, where you can sleep with the baby in the bed, but if you
rolling over.
Right, if you roll on the baby, you would feel it, and you cannot roll on the baby. That's the point of it. Someone let us have that one, and it was a lifesaver because the first night you're going to be basically just staring at the child, making sure that he's breathing.
And waking up every couple of hours to feed, and it helps. And I think it helped a lot with the bonding also with the baby, because some people wonder, oh, how am I going to bond with this child, that's not mine biologically. And I think that's one of the ways. And also while we were in the hospital, we did some, the nurses helped us with some bonding, which I'll get into later. But I think the co-sleeping helped a lot, and we wanted to do it, but we were afraid of what happens if we smother the baby. But this, I would recommend whoever, if you're into that, get a co-sleeper, and it has the rigid sides, but you can have it in the bed with you. The baby can be right there with you. You can make feeding at night easier, and then they can smell you, and that's one of the ways that babies bond is by their sense of smell. And so I think that's we're definitely going to do that again.
Yeah.
Those are really great tips, being so specific. I even wrote down some of them: onesies, wipes, diapers, blanket, lots of burp rags,
and car seats.
and a co-sleeper. We had a great question that I was thinking about too, and I know a couple people asked. So you were matched with her, and then you knew when she was due. Did you drive up a lot of time ahead? Because she wanted you at the hospital, right? Let's talk a little bit about how you even discussed the hospital plan with Eli's birth mom. But then did you drive up in advance, way in advance, or did you drive up just when you knew she was in labor? Because you went, I think we can talk about it, Texas to, did you say Minnesota?
Mm-hmm.
Where he was born. So, like you said, south to north.
So
Probably took you 1 or 2 days.
Yeah, so we drove the first day from Texas to Kansas, and then the next day Kansas to Minnesota. So we basically, when we were on the road after 8 hours, we Googled for in this case a Holiday Inn Express nearby. We found it. We called. We made the reservation, and we just showed up. Having a AAA would help a lot because you would get a better rate, and we just stay there for the night. What I would recommend if you do that is that you have your luggage, but if you're going to stay on the road at night, you have a smaller bag with all your toiletries and your underwear change, and that's it. Because you just go into the room, you don't have to bring all your bags like we had to, so that you can take out your toothbrush and your whatever. So just a small bag with the essentials. You take that, you go into the room, you sleep, shower the next day, and then you come back down and you're done. We didn't have a plan. We didn't plan the hospital thing. That was a complete surprise, but we'd had an idea of when she was going to be due. So we decided to drive there probably
a couple days before.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a date that she was supposed to be induced if she didn't give birth earlier. So there was like on a Wednesday she was going to be induced if she didn't give birth earlier. But they said she was dilated on like Monday. And there was a lot that kind of went back and forth. But we said we just would rather be up there a couple days early because we didn't want to miss it. So we did get up there on Sunday, even though she wasn't supposed to be induced until Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
So we just said we're here and we're ready. And we were supposed to meet up with her at Starbucks before she had an appointment. And she goes, I'm actually going into the hospital now. So why don't y'all meet us at the hospital? And so
she told us to wait, and we waited nearby just for news. And then she called and she said, I might be going into labor. You need to come here now. But we were like 3 blocks from the place, so we got there.
We just kind of hung out around the hospital.
That's what we did. So we were just hanging out, and we also found, she told us what was the hospital that she was going to give birth in at, so we found a hotel that was nearby the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got there, she was, not in labor, but she was in the process. So we were able to go and talk to her and meet her in person.
In her hospital room, we got there before she started pushing, and she invited. It was kind of a nervous time because this was the first time we'd met face to face, and we'd only talked on the phone like twice before that. Mm-hmm. So we really weren't sure what to expect, and so we went there, and she had 2 of her 2 sisters were there with her, and she seemed real calm, and she invited us to just hang out with them until she started pushing. So we were there in the hospital room with her while she's on the bed, and just kind of we were there more as observers, just letting her and her family, talk and interact. And we spoke kind of when she asked us questions. We tried to be unobtrusive, I guess, because we didn't want to be like, oh, here's the adoptive parents, and they're going to take over or anything.
And then something that you also need to know is that at that point, we knew that he was a boy. We knew like before we went there in the phone call, we knew he was a boy, and we had his name already, and we decided by then. And she did ask us how did we want to name him. So I gave him the name, and so when I don't know, I've never been, I don't know how it works having your own child, but apparently at some point the nurse will ask the birth mom what's going to be the name of the child, and that's the name he was registered from the very beginning with our name.
And it was interesting. She would said when we asked her about the name, because we had a name picked out, but we didn't want to just presume that we were going to name him. So while we were sitting in the hospital room, we asked her if she had a name or wanted input on the name. And her response was, you know, as far as I'm concerned, this is your baby. This is your son. So, you know, he's already yours, so you guys should name him. And we told her the name that we wanted, and Eli Sebastian is his name. And she said she loved it, and it was a beautiful name, and so everybody was happy.
So one of the things that...
And I just want to pause, too, because we did have a question about, you know, how did the hospital staff interact with you? And obviously, I think everything you're explaining is, well, they interacted very well. They were very favorable, very helpful. I love this photo you sent, Rebekah, of the board, because they gave you your own room to be with Eli. And I love, you know, that you have this experience here, taking this picture of this board just as if you'd given birth, that they would write the patient's name on there with the nurse's name and the baby's name and details. And what a priceless memory to have. And I know not all hospitals are like that, but more and more it's happening. And I think it's great that we're talking about this, because I would say those moments in the hospital are, you have to stay so flexible and willing to roll with the flow, that people are so curious. It makes them very nervous sometimes. Sometimes it makes them very excited. And so I love that we're talking about this. So when it came to even just showing up and introducing yourselves to the staff all the way to a couple of days that you were staying there, what was your feeling like with the staff at the hospital, with the nurses? How did they support Eli's birth mom, but also be supportive for you guys as you got to know Eli?
Well, we were told that the first order of business when we got to the hospital was to make friends with the nurses. Apparently, they're I don't know why they say that to us, but we needed to make friends with the nurses. So we didn't really have to do that, because everybody was so helpful and so nurturing. So
we know not everybody's situation. Every hospital is going to be different. But our personal experience was that this was a very family-oriented hospital, and when we walked in, we didn't even have to really say anything. The nurses kind of already knew that that she was a birth mother and she was giving the baby for adoption, and so they said, we are going to set you up in another room, a private suite on the other side of the ward, and we're going to treat, you know, she's the mother, a biological mother, but we're going to treat you guys as the parents, because this is her plan. And she had already listed out what Lifetime had given her of her birth plan and what she did want or didn't want, like during birth and immediately after birth. Like her preference was she wanted to see the baby but not to hold the baby. And so that was one of the things that the nurses had to be aware of, you know, as soon as the baby was born. And so they were kind of already aware of all that when we came. And our experience was, I mean, it was such a wonderful experience. The nurses put us in a room. We were outside the door as soon as he was born, because the nurses came and told us, hey, he's about to be born. And so we heard his first cries. We had it recorded on our phone that we could listen to later, and still makes me cry every time I hear it. And they immediately brought him to our room, and they threw me a hospital gown and said, take your top off, put this on, and we're going to give you skin to skin to bond with him. And so for the first, I don't even know how many hours, I just sat with him on my chest, and it was the most precious experience. And one of the things the nurses told me that I did not know before is that babies recognize their mother by the scent. And so when they're born, that's how they recognize their mother, and they can recognize their mother's scent distinct of another woman's within 24 hours. So that's why they said it was so important, because that he would bond with me. Since he was with me immediately after he was born, I was the scent that he would be bonded with, so that within a day he would be able to distinguish me as his mother distinct from other women. So I thought that was something very interesting that the nurses shared with me that I had never known.
Well, and I love that you could touch on that. That, to me, is even more reason that adoptive parents should be willing to drop and go when they find out their baby is in labor, because some people will wait. They want to say, well, I want to go when he's going to be discharged. You know, I want to make sure that she's totally sure before I show up. And but a lot of these birth mothers, even before they talk with adoptive parents, they are often telling us, can my baby start bonding with the adoptive parents right away? Because I want to make sure they know them as mom and dad. And I think that's just all the more reason to not delay, but to get there as quickly as you can. And it's not to say that if you adopt a baby who's a week old, you know, they're not going to come to bond with you and recognize you as mom. But that is an incentive, I would say, if you're looking for a newborn adoption and you get invited into a hospital experience like that, to take advantage of that, make the most of that, because it really is an asset for your baby's well-being too. It's awesome. It's awesome to hear that. So I love that you were choking up a little bit, and I want to share this photo. Now, you had a separate room from Eli's birth mother, but you did spend time with her here, and I love this photo you sent of the three of you with little Eli there in the middle. What's this photo mean to you talked about having a treasure box for Eli. I mean, I could just imagine this is priceless.
Oh yes, absolutely. We have one of two photos. We have two photos of her and us together, and we asked her if it would be okay if we took a picture for him, you know, for his treasure box that we have. And she said, you know, of course. And so we have this one, and there's another one just of her and I and Eli. And it was a really special time. This was right before that we were discharged, and so she said she wanted to come in and see him before we left, and so this was that moment.
Beautiful. And so I also, you sent some awesome pieces just to reflect the open adoption relationship you have with her that I want to make sure we get to also. But everyone's just loving all of your talk about packing and the hospital, so this is very helpful information. And then how long did you end up staying out of state with him?
We were 10 days total. It could have been more, but the lawyer, we had to secure a lawyer up there in Minnesota and a lawyer here, in addition to our lawyer that we had here.
And what you have to know is that the lawyer in Minnesota was representing her. So we paid for that lawyer to represent her. That's how it works. That's how the lawyer will explain it to you if that happens to be your situation. Of course, every situation is different, but the lawyer out of state is representing her. And so we were in constant contact with them even before we left from here to set up you know, what they were going to need, because of course they're going to need a retainer, which it's hefty, so you need to arrange for that before anything else moves. We didn't really need to see them. Everything was handled through the mail, but you do need to have, like in our case, before we moved a finger, we had that lawyer in place, and they started making contact with the birth mom to start the process. And we also had a lawyer here that was representing us to terminate the parental rights and finish the adoption process, and they were in communication, the Texas lawyer and the Minnesota lawyer. So that is also another thing that you have to consider. The cost is also something that you have to be aware. Every situation, of course, is different, but I think that it's pretty much standard that the first initial payment is going to be around $5,000. And then they will ask you for more as it's needed depending on the complexity of the case. And since I'm talking about this, we realize now that you need to be on your lawyer's case, like basically calling and getting an update every day, so that, you know, they're doing what they're supposed to, because we had a situation where they were waiting for some documents to be signed and the documents were not signed. So it was just by pure providence that we mentioned that to our lawyer here in Texas, and he said, well, let me try this other legal recourse in order for for us to get moving. So you need to have communication with both lawyers so that this the process goes out smoothly.
So back to your question,
and some of that can really vary depending on where you live and where she lives and the combination of those states. But
Yeah.
I love that you're speaking to that. I appreciate that information, but also for those of you who are waiting for a match, to keep in mind that those are things that, I mean, when you're working with a place like Lifetime, we're also going step by step with you, and when sometimes we even know the combination of states, 2 states in particular, can be a little stickier or more difficult than a combination of other states, and so we'll try and give families a heads up. But like you heard them say, it's really wise advice to work with qualified attorneys who are familiar with out-of-state adoptions so that you can get the guidance that Alan and Rebekah got, step by step, understanding who to communicate with, who needs what to keep this moving forward. It's vital to make sure you're working with people who know what you need, and not just, well, my cousin does divorce law. It's not always going to make it easier by working with someone you already know. You really want to work with someone who knows what you're after, what your goal is.
And they also need to know that Lifetime is the one who put us in contact with these 2 lawyers. So Lifetime doesn't stop working with you until a little bit after the adoption is final. So it's a long time after Eli was born that Lifetime was still, giving advice and contacting and aware of the situation.
And recommending people to deal with, yeah.
So you had this hospital stay and you packed all this stuff, and you probably had to hit a Walmart once or twice while you were there. A lot of people wonder on the front end as they're pursuing adoption, if it's really going to be as wonderful as they hope. If every day they're going to wake up and look at the child and think, well, I'm raising someone else's child, or what those feelings are that happen. Like you were saying, you bonded with him as his mother right away. And I know the answer, but I love to hear it from other adoptive parents to talk about, looking at this sweet photo of your little baby boy holding onto your finger, and the look in his face, and now he's 2. What is it like day to day just to be his parents? Do you constantly think about adoption? What would you tell other people who are thinking, well, is it really the same? Will I feel the same about this child?
I would say that absolutely it's your child. I'll say never, rarely think about him specifically, oh, this is our adopted child. I mean, he's our child. And I think even as we were driving home, it didn't really sink in because there was a little bit of nervousness of, that grace period or waiting period that before she actually signs papers. For example, hers was, I think, 72 hours. And then there were, weeks that went by before she signed the finalization. So until that happens, there's still a little bit of, is this really my child? Or, is this going to guard your heart a little bit? But for us, we didn't at all. We just kind of jumped in and said, this is our baby. And it really comes real on the day that you stand in that court and the judge says, I deem you guys that, you guys are the parents, and that's final. And, that happened about 6 months after Eli was born, that we finalized his adoption, which is kind of long. I think most adoptions are a little bit shorter than that. But it's not at all something that we think of every day. He's our adopted child. I think we love him even more than we would love one of our own biological kids.
and something that is important that the couples have to know is that you both need to be into adoption 100%, not just a little bit. You are all in, and both, or not at all. Because once you have the child, that child is yours and is yours forever. Adopted or not, that is your kid. You have the responsibility, that duty. So that is also very important. We were aware of that before going into that. This was our child no matter what.
And we love him unconditionally. I never thought I could love a child as much as I love him. And every day that goes by, I love him more than the day I did. I mean, now he's 2. I love him immensely more than I did even the day he was born. And, I mean, it just, your love's going to continue to grow. And so don't let the feeling that, well, if this isn't my biological child, I won't love them as much. That's not going to happen. I mean, once they become yours, it's just, I can't even explain it. It's amazing.
Thank you for touching on that. So I want to maybe speak a little bit about open adoption. And I know in the beginning you talked about some of those fears or just lack of information. And I would say open adoption is probably one of the most misunderstood topics out there until you start hearing and knowing people who live with it. So let's talk a little bit about, and I'm going to keep popping up these adorable photos, but what is it like now that you've been raising him? You've been parents for 2 years, but you've also been in an open adoption for 2 years, and certainly he's a little young to have the sit-downs and answer tons of questions yet, but I know that you talk freely about adoption in front of him, and that you're raising him to know who his birth family is, you know, by name, and the love you have for them. What would you tell people who really don't understand open adoption, or what would you tell them open adoption is like for you guys?
Well, I would tell them I was one of those that I was not really sure, but now I realize that open adoption is not co-parenting. We are the parents. It just happens to be that we have communication with the birth mom. We send her a letter every year, and we might text every other month. Maybe a Facebook message here and there, send some photos, but it's not like she has the ability to come into the house and take him or ask for him to be flew over to Minnesota. It doesn't work like that. It just means that you have communication with the mom, and then she knows the whereabouts of the child, and that is it. In the future, if she decides that she wants to see him or wants to visit, we will tell her, or we would work with her how we can arrange a meeting in whatever, but we're always going to be supervising. She's not going to take the baby on her own. This is not a shared custody or anything like that. It's just like any other relative that you go visit, you see them, and then you take your child with you, and then you leave. They have no rights over the child whatsoever. So it doesn't work like that. Like, oh, you're going to have the baby for the weekend, and then he will come back. It is not like that. That was one of my fears. That's what I thought it was, but it's not like that at all. And in the case of our birth mom, she wanted to have very limited contact. She just wanted to be aware of what was going on, but that's it. And she said that eventually she would maybe want to meet with him, but at this moment, she just wants to see photos and maybe get an update or two, and that's it.
And most of the time, those updates we're the ones initiating contact with her. And again, all birth moms are different, but in our case, like Alan said, we weren't really sure what to expect, but most of the time we're the ones most of the time it's between her and I sending texts. We've had maybe 3 conversations total. It's been over text or on Facebook, sending photos, videos, like if he does something cute, or like he's wearing a jacket that she gave him for his birthday, and I'll send a photo and, say how much he's enjoying it, and, little things like that, just so she sees and she has more assurance that she made the right decision and that he is loved and cared for and provided for, and, that he is our baby.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Rebekah, you talked when we were doing our sound check and preparation and everything, you said a similar thing to what Alan just explained about how it's like extended family. And that you are raising Eli to think of her as a long-distance relative, someone that you care about, you keep in touch with. I think that's such a great way to explain it. When you have the potential for open adoption, of course, you have to take cues from that birth mom. And, I'm sure you would have responded differently if she wanted to have phone calls you know, more often if she didn't really text, but she wanted to talk a few times a year or something, that would look different for you, but that you've taken cues from her, what works for her. But can you talk about, I want to pull up something, so you say on average, you know, the average contact is more like texting and you'll probably just reach out. While I'm pulling up one of these sort of scrapbooks that you send her, now he's had 2 birthdays that you've done this tradition. I imagine you're sort of setting the stage for the future, that you put these together, these little books for her to see his milestones, and you write her a precious letter. I would love for you to talk about a story you were telling me yesterday about a video you sent to her with Eli talking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for his 2nd birthday, she sent him a really cute little teddy bear that was, we're Patriots fans, and she remembered that and sent us a pillow pet with a Patriots jersey on it. And Alan was squealing on the video, and Eli was like, "Oh, this is so neat!" And so he was cuddling with the bear. So I was taking a video intentionally to try to to send to her later and show her his gifts, him opening his gifts. And then towards the end of the video, we say thank you, Becky. And so he looks at the camera and he says, "Thank you, Becky." And so I sent her that video clip of him, and she just sent me back the sweetest message and said that was the most amazing thing you've ever, that I've ever seen. And she said it makes her so proud, and she saw how handsome he was, and he's such a sweet kid, and how thankful. And she says this almost every time she talks to us, how thankful she is that we are his family and that he is so loved. And she says thank you for raising him.
Mm-hmm. I love the sentiment that you wrote. My computer's being a little weird. I've heard from some adoptive parents sometimes that they get a little nervous about what to put in the contact that they share, the updates that they share about their child, and that sometimes they wonder, well, how touchy-feely should I get, and how much should I share? Should I include just photos of our child, or should I show us all together? And you've really, this is just one page out of his first year little scrapbook, that your sentiment here, we are so thankful for the opportunity you have given us to raise this precious child. We love him so much, and our love for him continues to grow day by day. We cherish every single moment, and will continue to do our best to provide for his each and every need. Love, Alan and Rebekah. I think that right there is what so many birth moms find reassuring. They find it comforting. They like knowing that you are over the moon for this child that they trusted you to raise. And you just explained that, how much she's grateful to you. I think that often is the most surprising thing to adoptive parents before they've adopted, before they've been in contact with that birth mom, is to know that she actually wants to know how happy you are with her child. That it means a lot to her to even have your gratitude and your appreciation a year down the road, 2 years down the road, that she's not going to read that and feel worse about her decision. In fact, it makes her feel even more reassured and touched to know that you still think of her, but that you still honor her as part of your family's story. You haven't forgotten her, but that you are so grateful for this child. That because I've never met a birth mom, even under the worst case scenario, every single birth mother I've worked with cares so much about what happens to her child. And these updates, I can just imagine the peace of mind it brings, the healing that comes. It's beautiful to see, and I love that you sent these, because I think so often people wonder, well, what should I send? What is that like? What do other people do? And you've sort of found your own way, your own little niche. And so I hope maybe this gives people ideas. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah.
I imagine that you probably made one of these even for Grandma,
Well, we did. We kind of sent him a copy. We did this, and then we took off the letter part and let family see it. And it's like a scrapbook for him as he grows. But one thing I was going to say about addressing birth moms, or how you view a birth mom, I mean, if you think of one of the most precious gifts you ever got, you would remember the person that gave you that gift. And so that's how we view her, is that she has given us the most amazing, precious gift, one-of-a-kind, unique gift that nobody else could ever give us. And we view her as the giver of that gift, because she was the one who had to make that selfless decision and had to be sacrifice her own desires to be able to keep that child, and gave him to another family to raise. And so we give her that respect, and want to show her, all the time how thankful we are for this gift, and that we are trying to be faithful in what we originally promised to her of how we were going to raise him and what we were going to provide him, and saying, you gave us this gift, and so here's your return, so to speak.
Well, yeah. I love it. Is open adoption awkward for your family to understand? When you talk about her, or when you talk about sharing these updates, does your family understand, or do you just kind of do your thing and they just know Eli as part of the family? I mean, what is that like to explain it to the people close to Eli?
We don't talk about her much with the family, because Eli is the one, and this is just what we decided. Eli is the one that needs to know first about
like specifics about her, right, and like decisions she's made, or like her history and all of that. That's for him to decide. But as far as Eli being adopted and who his birth mom is, I mean, our whole family is pro-life, and so the fact that a woman chose life for her child and then and place it for adoption is something to rejoice in. And so that's how they feel towards Eli and towards his mom. His birth mom, right, is thankful as well, just as we're thankful for the gift. They're thankful that she chose life for him.
And like what I was saying is that, like, for example, this birth, the letters that we send to her, those we don't share with the family. Those are still private because those belong to Eli.
The letter, yeah.
It's between him and his birth mother. So that's why there are a lot of things that we don't share with our family, because we want that to be Eli's, his treasure. And then eventually later on, when Eli is more aware of what's happening, then we will be more open with the family about specific communication and stuff. Like this small thing of the letter. Our families don't see the letter. It's just between us, Eli, and his birth mom. That's just the way we're handling, just for respect to her and Eli, because we want him to be the first to know all of these things.
I'm glad that you put it that way. I really appreciate that, because there has been more and more adoption professionals, and certainly Lifetime has been speaking to this too, but there's the whole matter of how much is too much information? How much do I need to tell others about my child's adoption story? And I think everything you've shared tonight is probably stuff that your family knows, the wonderful details about how you met him and how much you love her. But like you said, letting him decide who knows more of the details, and letting him tell people, well, this is the kind of person she is, and having some things to hold to himself so that he can really kind of identify with them first, rather than having, Aunt so-and-so or cousin this and that just walk up and know his life before he's even old enough to understand. I think that's really wise advice.
I agree.
And so many people would question that. And I would say, if you're listening to this and you are not yet matched, but it's even good advice if you've already maybe spilled too much before, it's never too late, I think, to go back and decide, well, what would I want for my child maybe 10 years from now, or 15 or 20 years from now when they're an adult, to be able to hold close to their heart and not feel like everyone knows their life story just because they were adopted at one point into the family. But certainly there are aspects in every adoption that should be kept private between birth parents and adoptive parents, and not everything's appropriate to talk about with everyone. So I love that you could speak to that. Thank you for opening up about that. And I love some of these photos, just seeing the interaction as a family. It's so inspiring to just see your regular life as parents. let's see here. Kim, I know you've been fielding some of the questions here, and we're about to wrap up tonight, but is there anything you want to add before we close with Alan and Rebekah?
I mean, just an observation is that I love the way they each explained open adoption. Like, I love how Alan shared in very concrete black and white terms what open adoption is and isn't. I feel like in his talk he gave about that topic, that really helped ease a lot of parents' minds about it. And then to hear Rebekah's details about how it's actually playing out, what that contact actually looks like, and how she's the one that usually is the one initiating. People are saying that it's not as scary as they thought it would be. So it's really good to hear those from you guys. I appreciate that.
And something I have to add is that another thing is that once the judge said it is final, no one, even the birth mom, no one can come and legally challenge you for the custody of the child. That's something that we didn't know until the lawyer explained it to us. That's something that, you know, probably it's, I don't know, overlooked or whatever, but it would have helped me to feel at ease before getting into that once you are officially named a parent, no one can ever come and challenge that. You are the parent, and period. So that you need to remember that.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. I think that's great for, you know, because a lot of adoptive parents do have that question kind of nagging in the back of their mind. I mean, am I always going to be in jeopardy? Or how long is it going to go? When am I going to know that this is my child?
Yeah, you know, as soon as you go out from that court with that decree of adoption, it's legal, it's final, done.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, I was just looking at my notes. There was one thing I wanted. Rebekah, we spoke a little bit about that sometimes it's a while before you'll hear back from his birth mom when you do share updates, and some adoptive parents get a little nervous about, well, should I continue sharing updates? I haven't heard from her since the last time I sent a photo or the last time I wrote a letter. Can you give a little perspective about just how you personally handle it when she's living her own life and you don't hear from her right away like you might with, you know, a friend or a grandma?
Well, I think in the beginning when I did, in the beginning there were longer pauses between communication, and I just basically, I came to find out later that it's just because she's going through a lot of pain, and the separation of her child and just the grieving process that she had to go through. And as time has gone on and the more that we've communicated with her and we've sent these newsletters and the more affirmation that she has that Eli is living a good life and that she sees how much fun he's having, how much fun we're having with him, and when she sees that, I think that just confirms for her more that, you know, this is the good thing and that, you know, everything is okay, and I did make the right decision, because I think in like closed adoptions, and I know so few adoptions are closed now, but when there's that mystery that a birth mother has, if my child goes into like this black hole, what happens to them? Are they okay, and are they enjoying their life, and are these parents taking good care of them? You know, all that mystery, and there's mystery on the child's side as well as, well, who is my birth mother? Who, you know, where did I get my hair color, my eye color, my personality traits? You know, certain idiosyncrasies I have. You know, things like that. When you have open adoption, it's just, you know, it's called the adoption triad for a reason. You know, there's more people, an extended family to give these children love and to share in the enjoyment of their growing up. And, you know, we have communication not just with his birth mom, but I have communication with her sister as well, and they both send gifts and cards and say, you know, how much they love watching him grow. And so that relationship is really, it can be a blessing to you and not a hindrance and not something you need to be afraid of. And it's hard to see that when you're on the other side before the adoptions happened. It's so hard to see that. But just know when that does finally happen, you're going to see a whole different side, and it's going to be the most wonderful thing ever.
Mm-hmm. You said something I wanted to say just to cap off that beautiful sentiment you just shared. You said, you know, you have to remember that she's trusting you to love her child as much as she does.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where an adoption plan comes from when it comes to the birth mother. Is it's a place of love. She's thinking ahead, and especially, you know, when you think about Eli's birth mother, she was already a mom. She knew how hard this was. She knew the blessings too, which is why she herself felt that it'd be too much to hold him in the hospital. Every woman has to make that plan for herself. She has to know what she wants and make a plan for her child, whether that's bringing that baby home and how am I going to make this work, or trusting other people to raise him. And an open adoption can be such a blessing for all involved, just like you were saying. So I really appreciate all the different sort of points we got to touch on tonight. It was really great. If you guys don't mind hanging out for just maybe 5 more minutes, we had a really great question come in for Alan, just asking if there was anything in particular that you did to bond with your son in those early days. I know bedtime is sort of your thing because Rebekah's home with Eli during the day, and you look forward to that now. But in the early days, was there anything that you did or that you would recommend the dads do to bond with the child when they're starting out together?
Yeah, the nurse told me, and I thought it was just like she was out of her mind, but I did it because I assumed she knew. I had him bare-chested, like he was on his diaper, and that was it. And I had him skin to skin. That's how we would sleep, you know, at night. And I would hold him, and I would caress him and massage him. Because we saw in one of the lifetime resources that the dad also needs to caress the child and have physical contact with the child. He can recognize your touch, you know, like just the strength of your hand and your scent and just, you know, everything. And he can recognize that I was that and mom different. So I did spend a long time with him, just, you know, holding him and talking to him. I started reading to him as soon as we got to the hotel, just for him to get acquainted with my voice and just, you know, doing all those things, spending time with him. All those things will help you. They need it. It's important. So if you're not a reader, you will become a reader. And if you're not very I don't know, affectionate, you will have to become affectionate because your child depends on that. I mean, it's so important for the development. So those were some of the things that I started doing. Like that photo that you showed with me holding, with him holding my finger, that was, you know, deliberate. I was, you know, trying for him to hold me and just, you know, touch his hand and things like that. I had to feed him several times. Just to spend some time with him because I don't know. I mean, I wanted to do that, but I also realized the importance of that. So, and change his diaper, just stuff like that.
Being involved,
I mean,
and I think well, because, you know, they do say when a woman is pregnant that the child can hear at a certain point, they can hear sounds and start to recognize their mother and their father's voices. And with adoption, you don't necessarily get that benefit. And so one of the cool things you can get, though, is, especially since, well, more and more it's happening, but most adoptive moms still choose to bottle feed just because it's a little easier to get things going for the baby, but that also means you get to share feeding with dad, and for you to step in and be involved right away, since you didn't necessarily have that 9 months to even for yourself mentally connect to that child, I think it's even more important that dad jumps in right away to help with diaper changes and feedings and just the sleep routine. So I'm glad you could speak to that. And every couple's going to be a little different. Certainly every newborn sometimes is a little different, but that you really looked for ways to dive in, which, Alan, I think really speaks to where we started with your chat tonight, which was obviously everything you did once you met this baby reflects every bit of care and intention you had in moving forward with adoption from the beginning, even though you weren't feeling the same way about it during the wait as Rebekah was. Certainly in the end, I bet Rebekah was thinking, okay, yeah, you're right. I know that you thought about it as much as I did, you know. And just to see each other as parents, I know that's such a precious, priceless thing for adoptive parents to get to see each other with a child that they both worked so hard to get toward, and to add to their family. So you guys have brought so much out tonight. We're all so grateful. We've had some really positive comments. Everyone's been so encouraged. Plus all the logistic tips you brought up. It's just been great. So thank you so much for being here tonight. Is there anything that either one of you want to add before we finish tonight?
Just to encourage all those, whoever, I don't know the audience who's waiting or who's, you know, hasn't even decided to choose Lifetime yet, or I mean, I know there's a wide variety of people listening, but just know that if you are looking into adoption, Lifetime is awesome. And they're not paying us to say that. And also, adoption is going to be more amazing than you can even imagine right now. And you may have tons of questions. Ask people. Ask those questions. Listen to webinars. Ask Lifetime. You know, talk to people who've been through adoption. And those questions will be answered. Not all of them, maybe. Some of them may not be answered until you've already adopted your child, and then you're starting to live life with a new baby and figure all those things out. But just know that you're going to be blessed beyond your wildest imagination, and it's going to be awesome. We are loving every single day of life here, and it's full of more joy than we could have even imagined.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Very encouraging. We have a ton of people popping up saying, oh, thank you for saying that. Thank you so much. So we're grateful. Kim, thanks for fielding all the questions behind the scenes tonight, too. And certainly, if any of you have feedback or questions after tonight's webinar, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to your coordinator if you have one already at Lifetime. You can also just email generally adopt@lifetimeadoption.com, and we'll answer those questions as quickly as we can, or we would just love to even hear how this webinar helped you. So please let us know so that we can also work on future events to touch on these similar topics or share stories like this. So thank you all for joining us this evening, and watch your email and visit adoptionteleconference.com, because we have a lot more webinars coming up just to continue celebrating Adoption Month, and as we go into the holidays, to just prepare you for adoption in the new year too. So we look forward to meeting with you all again soon. And Alan and Rebekah, thank you again so much for spending time with us tonight. We hope you'll continue to keep in touch and send us all these cute pictures.
We will. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Good. Great. Good night, everyone. We'll talk with you again soon.
Good night, everyone.